Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Philosophical Weightlifting Podcast. I'm joined today by repeat guest Todd Kashdan, one of my favorite authors, and one of the only people on the podcast who I've started interacting with before the show, and he kind of pushed me to flex a little bit to showcase my physique as a means of something you work toward. It's part of the brand. It's like have it front and center versus kind of like shying away from that. So I really appreciate that. Todd, how are you doing today?
I am so glad to be on here and be anti-pump cover for fit people who have podcasts.
Yeah, no, I love to hear that. And I think before the show I was thinking, what am I going to talk about with Todd? I should be prepared. I had that like voice in my head of, you don't have an outline, you should have topics, which is not the way I operate at all. Like in reality, what I do is I hit record and I just try to explore, this space of where's the expertise, what are we interested in, let's kind of wrap on it and see where it goes. But the one thing that did stick out, and Todd, the one thing I did want to talk about, but I feel obligated to mention this now. Happy birthday, happy late birthday, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, it's one of the fun things about going to the gym is when people come up to you and say like, "Oh, you're really fit." I'm like, "Wait till you're 51 and realize it is not the same game when you're 40, 30, 20." Thank you.
And you say that, and for everyone who's listening, please go check out Todd's Instagram because you're jacked. You're jacked.
Appreciate it. Big time.
Yeah.
It is very hard to hold on to. So honestly, I am gonna be honest, I am more proud of it now than when I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
Because like a lot of people who are listening to this, you see your high school friends, and you don't say it to them, but you tell your close friends, you're like, "Yo, what happened to a nod? Like he's like a circle now." So it's hard to do. Like it's like you're fighting metabolism.
Yeah, you are. And I think, I'm really privileged and kind of lucky to be in this space where I I worked with previously. She actually, this is a Max's Gym t-shirt. She like co-owns the team that I coach for. Her name's Joanne. She's 55 and she squatted like 300 pounds and she weighs like 135 pounds. Um, just insane, like jacked, really strong. And when I think about my own like lifting journey, the things I'm most proud of, my 10-year anniversary lifting weights, it's like I've been doing this for a decade
Yeah.
plus. So kind of your point about that, like those are the things that stick out as being really meaningful and important. Once you've done it long enough, you're kind of over like those really exaggerated moments of celebration and like I accomplished this thing. It's like I've been doing this for a long time and I still look good. I still feel good. I still operate, at a pretty high level too.
It's funny. I wrote this article that I was hoping to go a little more wildfire than it did, but it was like, what are the indicators of health as you get older, right? Everyone listening is getting older. So you've got a few things, especially for men. So one is like your bowel movement. Like, is it smooth?
Yeah.
Is it easy? Like, is it like, are you in and out like real
Yeah.
quickly? Don't bring too big, thick of a magazine. You've got are you like sexually aroused, physiologically aroused in the morning? This is just a good indicator of like, oh, your body is ready for the world, the action. I mean, this is Darwinian in like one blood pulsing area of your body that happens there, men and women. And then the third one is like, can you like roll out of bed and have like this flexibility? There's this moment when you're 51 and you just kind of do this like sideways cartwheel somersault out of bed, and you're like, this is going to be a good day. I feel
Yeah.
fluid in my body, like I feel flexible. Like, all right, bring it on.
And I actually I love that. And I'll make sure I link your Substack because you always have great pieces coming out. And my resolutions, for 2025, they were very simple. I do a lot of things really well in terms of nutrition. in terms of like physical activity, in terms of trying to be up on like my psychological skills. Like I do a lot of stuff. I always give myself a hard time, but I would say I do them well. And my really my goals were to tighten them up even more. So it's like I know what very good nutrition is, and that's fruits and vegetables and kind of minimally processed foods, like more fiber rich foods, more protein. Physical activity, I would just lift weights. I'd never do any like cardio or endurance training. And I know that you can't make up for those benefits with lifting weights. You can't make up for the cardiovascular benefits just lifting weights. And then from a psychological side, it's like, hey, I had this as like a pet interest for 10 years. I should be able to, continue to build that ability to like self-regulate and manage stressful situations. I've been like crushing that. I've been running more consistently. I've been trying to sleep more. I've had more, I would say, like more well-rounded nutrition. And it's kind of to your point of as you age, having these kind of like what I'd call like North Stars that will allow you to age kind of like, I don't want to say gracefully because it's still, just like smoothly, but to maintain what you've developed or continue to improve your health with age. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah,
That you did that.
I'm curious what psychological experiments that you do to yourself to test your skills.
Oh, I would say that the one thing that's been really helpful is seeing a therapist consistently and then trying to think about and relate like each session to the last or to, a month ago or a few months ago. Like what kind of headspace was I in? How did I feel? What was the general demeanor I'd like bring to sessions? What was the focus? What would we talk about? And you can feel a tangible difference where I'd have a lot of like uncertainty, unsureness. I would kind of like always caveat things with, well, I'm not perfect or this isn't perfect. And I found myself having a lot more like surety and confidence and more of a just like a hopeful spin. And I don't think that's like contrived. I think it's just the way I've lived. I've been able to organize things that have moved in that direction
Yeah,
purposefully, which is actually great for the conversation because now this like thing that's been in the back of my head. So my buddy Chris Tabor, he's a professor at Sacred Heart. And he sent me a box of books that are, How to Be a Stoic, George Orwell, The Closing of the American Mind, Albert Camus, like stuff like that. And I started
good list.
listening to Jonathan Haidt's The Coddling of the American Mind this morning, and I'm thinking about discipline. And I'm sitting in a coffee shop, and they're crafting these like really delicious, really over the top drinks, and I'm like, man, that's just such like a hyper palatable, just like it's like I get it, like it tastes great, but it's just so gluttonous, it's just so like and everything's so gluttonous, and it's like where does that I hate to say discipline come in, but that like focus on you know not needing it or not wanting it at least all the time. And I think that can be kind of spread throughout like the physical activity, nutrition, psychology, like, just that deeper level of thinking beyond wants, interests, and impulses and comfort and convenience. So I was thinking about that this morning, and you've done a lot of great work kind of talking about that. Maybe differently, but I'd love you to just riff on that stuff if you have anything in mind.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, let's pivot away from food and drink, which is sort of like an easy place to play, and let's pivot to some place where it might be a little bit harder. So, for everyone that's listening, that's for example is still, I don't know, seeking a romantic partner, right? So, you've got this very challenging situation where you're going to find people that match with you. So first of all, you have to think about yourself. Okay, to go back to your North Star thought, what are going to be the key characteristics that going in I'm looking for, right? So most people cross culturally, this is David Buss's research, about 57 countries. You've got kindness, intelligence, warmth. Warmth isn't the same as kindness. And then you're looking for sense of humor. So this is pretty common around kind of the country. But now you gotta dive in further. So do they have a dark, sarcastic sense of humor? Like gallows, like can you have the intimacy where take it to the grave conversations where you make fun of everyone in your lives that's annoying. And it's not because you despise all these people, it's just like this is a place where I get to vent. Like if you don't have that, can you really get sufficient intimacy for you? Like these are like the things that you need to think about. Now here's where it gets interesting. You meet someone that's an 8 on out of 10 on intellect, and they're a 7 on humor, and they're obviously there has to be physical attraction so your head isn't flipping around and you're not harming your trapezius muscles on a regular basis every time you go to a bar. So you got that. So maybe there are 7 there. So now when you get to the realistic world, this jagged profile of their characteristics isn't going to match up perfectly with your ideal. The challenge is that you have this dating app system. You have this sheer supply, seemingly endless supply system in your brain that makes you think, you know what? They're so good, but I bet you I could find someone that's an 8 or an 8.5 on humor. They're so good, but attractiveness, like, you know what? Like their calves are kind of thin, and I kind of like a muscular, more like sculpted calf that happens there. And you can get really picky really quick. And so one of the places for psychological discipline where men tend to be really bad at, women are just okay at, is this idea of satisficing. Can you satisfice and have, once you think ahead of time in terms of what are the characteristics you're looking for, knowing that for feral humans, no one's going to be a perfect match. No one's going to be even close to a perfect match. But do you feel good in your skin? Do you feel like you could be yourself? Do you feel energized after a long conversation, which does take cortical activity and should tire you? This is my best indicator. Do you feel more energized when you leave than when you started? Or do you feel depleted? And so this is where like you have to have the discipline of, I'm going to stick with this and try this out before going back to the slot machine and trying to find something that's closer to this idyllic vision that doesn't really exist.
Yeah, and it's funny. I think every time we record a podcast, I have this feeling of this is exactly what I would want to talk about if I had Todd on the podcast. It's just so like up my up my alley in terms of what I think about. And I love you kind of bringing that to dating where it is very complex. You're trying to aggregate a bunch of different like traits or things that would make someone seem attractive to you. And I've been thinking about this because I've been just too consumed about this idea of like randomness and predictability with like so many different inputs coming in to create basically an output. It's like from a dating standpoint, it feels like if you go long enough, probability should work in your favor, but then you realize that probability doesn't have a memory, and you're like, okay, that's
It's a great phrase.
yeah. So from your standpoint, if you kind of continue to go back to the slot machine, so to speak, you could be kind of like running in circles of I'll find the next best thing and I'll find the next best thing. Then what is an active way of approaching this where it's okay, let me try and satisfy this and find something that works. And then is it like a commitment to that process and the development of that process that you would just see through? I guess how would you know you're in a good spot to then start to work from?
So this is great. Let's play with this. So I have 2 thoughts come to mind in terms of strategies for people to use practically. One is this endowment effect. And that is when you think about and I like this term that I use, kind of jagged profile. This jagged profile of someone has the characteristics you're looking for, right? So you might not someone that's like a political extremist. You definitely don't want woke. You definitely don't want alt-right. So like you're basically like that could be a very important variable. So one thing to think about very carefully is go in and hold a lot of these things loosely, because once the chemistry happens between 2 people, once you realize like they're so interesting, they make you laugh, you make them laugh, their laugh is so cute that it makes you laugh, that's not in your profile because it doesn't exist until you actually have interaction. So when you have these absolutes, it's a big thing. People talk about red flags. They talk about like these non-conditional things they have to have. They have to be religious. Like they have to be they have to be wealthy or whatever the thing is. And then you meet someone, you're like, you know what? They are so cool. I'm open to being with someone that's atheist. I'm open to be someone that's being, Islamic, Jewish, Christian that goes in there. So one of the bits of advice is go in with intentions, but hold some of those things kind of loosely because watch the magic happen. The other one with this endowment effect is if I was to look at you before you got your last car and you were actually at the shop and you were online and you were checking out, and finally you realized like, all right, one of these three cars, I'm gonna test drive them. Like this is gonna be my baby. Like I'm so pumped to get it. Your enthusiasm of the anticipation of having one of these cars is off the charts. Now, when you have the car or the gal or the guy, right? This is all just like an analogy. It drops. It's
Yeah.
like I already got this thing. I have already integrated this into my life. I have this thing. I can wake up in the morning and drive this thing. I can get out of my house any point in time, jump into this car and drive it, and you sort of lose appreciation for it. Now, if you wake up one day, Tuesday, and you're pumped to go on a long car drive on Highway 1 in California where all the car commercials are filmed, and you find out it's gone, and you call the police, and they're like, listen, we don't chase after missing cars. Like, we're never going to find your car. Your love for that car will be even greater than when you anticipated having that car. So put this together. Anticipatory joy is wild, super high. When you actually lose something, you have such a love affair with the thing, the person, the situation. But when you have it, ownership, or you've been accepted, you've been brought into the mix, our gratitude and appreciation goes down. So it's worth understanding what happens to you psychologically before, during, and after.
Yeah. Well, I want to make a nod to this meme that I saw, and it's like, like modern day scientists, and it says, I've studied this thing and specialized in this thing for decades, and based on our findings, we can make tentative conclusions that it might be probable. And then it's 1700s philosopher, and it's like I had these thoughts while I was in the bath, and these are the universal laws that I've come to the conclusion that we exist under. I think you're going from that like armchair theorizing and philosophizing to like being on the bench, so to speak, and having to put the stuff to practice and say, I can think that I don't want to be with someone who is religious, or who comes from a different socioeconomic status or has all these differences. But in reality, when that stuff pans out or shakes out, it might not be as big of a deal or a deal breaker than I thought. And I think a lot of that, like, be in a situation where you can experience and can put those beliefs to test and say, like, I guess, does it actually mean that much, or is it just something that I believed would? And this circles back to that idea of the kind of the introduction of the coddling of the American mind, which is I'm like really offended by ideas that go against my beliefs. And I was thinking about this because I've kind of become more and more open to criticism as a coach. It's like I just want to do a better job. So I need to see other coaches coach. I need to get feedback from athletes. I need to actually be okay with the discomfort of like, yeah, that kind of sucks. Like that's not good. I should probably readjust my process or like refine my process. How do we move from that like armchair theorizing and belief, that what we know is best is actually best to, you know, I don't think there is a best, but through direct experience, I can kind of shape my beliefs to actually fit into a world where many people have to coexist and get along and be, productive and capable citizens, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it really well. If you were to take everything that my lab studies and in this field of well-being science, curiosity, courage, creativity, discipline, remarketed as being gritty, this is all about uncertainty management. Like, how do you manage uncertainty? So there is no certainty that you're going to find a match romantic wise. There is no certainty that your close peeps, your wise counsel, your best friends are going to stick around, or they're going to be alive for like 5 years from now. There's no certainty that your job is going to provide satisfaction or stability. And in this world, what are you going to do about that? So one of the important elements of this is recognizing that your emotions are these amazing signals that tell you something is awry before potentially really deep cognitively you've considered it. And the example that I would give is when you're in an elevator late at night and you're at a hotel or if you live in an apartment complex and someone just walks in, you get the heebie-jeebies, right? Like,
Mm.
just like, you know, maybe you stand up a little bit like more formidable, like you have the bigger posture, kind of like the, alpha male or woman kind of posture. Maybe you're like a little bit nervous and feeling like I want to stand a little bit further away from this person. I kind of check my pockets, like have that little hand gesture to kind of make sure my wallet's still there. Evolutionary wise, 150,000 years, 200,000 years, your body's telling you something's off, that it picked up a cue that you might not have recognized this. This happens in all sorts of situations. In the workplace, telling someone something like, you know what? I don't know if I should have said that to that person. And so it's worth keeping tabs on when you're feeling something's off, when you're feeling as if someone's potentially, you're not sure if they're a friend or a foe, when you're not sure if there's physical danger, social danger, financial danger, like your investments. Pay attention to these emotional experiences. Sometimes it'll be wrong. But when you think about kind of the wager of it's worth checking out what my emotions are directing me towards versus going down a direction of leaving a job, starting a relationship with someone where your body is sort of telling you, you know what? I
Yeah.
need you to kind of like chill and go a little bit slower.
Yeah, I love that. And I guess how do we move from the how would we move from this space of knowing that we maybe have a revulsion to, or some sort of like negative feeling or emotion in response to uncertainty or like a conflict of interest? How do we know if that's founded in something to pay attention to or just like a bias? Because what I've realized as I've kind of thought, because I tried to abstain from being in politics, thinking about politics, and a lot of that's just like I I have a hard time grasping the depth of information that exists and how I could even understand things in a way to formulate a coherent perspective or opinion. Like I see it all as like I'm getting so much conflicting information. I don't know how to sort it out, how to bring it together and then say like, yeah, I believe these are my political views. But as I've started to just listen to people who I feel are experts on certain topics, and I'll say Jordan Peterson because I love his stuff. And as he kind of I listen to all of his like mythological, psychological, personality stuff, and it'll bleed into the political realm. And as he starts to talk about that, I'm like, okay, that conflicts with my biases. Maybe I'm wrong. Okay, how do I reorganize my thoughts? Because I have this natural aversion to it because I feel like it's wrong. But I think that aversion is because I have an absence of information too. So as new information comes in, I'm like, okay, maybe that has some basis or bearing. People just aren't wrong outright because they have different information that they're using to reason through something. It might be that you don't have the same information to use as as a way of reasoning toward that same end. So I guess those feelings, those like gut instincts, the negative kind of like friction of hearing something different, seeing someone different, having this new experience. How do we know if that's bias or if that's just a lack of information where we're not up to speed enough to be able to understand what's going on?
Yeah. I love your intellectual humility that you're not spouting your political opinions because you feel like you haven't grappled enough. It's a rarity. It's beautiful. You're gonna have biases. I think we have to own our biases. You're not gonna overcome your biases. You're not gonna get rid of your biases. Every one of us is xenophobic. There's some great research by Douglas Kenrick at University of Arizona, which shows that when you experience disgust, so let's say like I'm like, hey, let's go take a trip to like the public bathroom and just go look in the toilets, see who flushed, see who didn't, and then afterwards, I expose you to a bunch of people who are a different race than you. You have less friendly behavior and less affinity towards them after going to that bathroom. Now, do you know it's because subconsciously the disgust reaction activating you is influencing other people? No, but it does. Like we have these very strange biases that just get activated. And we have to understand that we have these different mindsets. There's a romantic mindset, there's a friendship seeking mindset, there is avoiding or fighting enemy mindset. There is a maintaining relationship mindset. There's a parenting or generativity mindset, taking care of the next generation. And different situations activate these biases. So to me, one of the most valuable things is know what mindset is activated. And so if I'm hanging out with someone and I'm recognizing that whoa, you're throwing a lot of stuff at me. I think you're a conspiracy theorist. I think this is nonsense. My enemy avoidance mindset got activated. Like you're potentially an enemy, and you basically could put me at risk for me losing my allies in my group if I was them start to believe, listen to, and start hanging out with you. Now, this is antiquated, really ancient mindsets that are like under in the basement of your mind that are being activated. As soon as I can call it what it is, then all of a sudden I can play with it. And the real secret after figuring out like what mindset you're in is then to realize, to think about like, to what degree am I getting lost in a narrative and are they getting lost in a narrative? And so Jordan Peterson, for me, I think very often gets lost in his narrative. He gets really stuck in kind of, the woke virus narrative that he doesn't like that gets in there, and he kind of will shove something in there. And sometimes I think he's a little bit incurious about thinking about this issue, this person that happens there. I'm not saying he's not intelligent. I'm not saying he's not incredibly philosophical and beautiful to listen to, but I watch him. He knows that this story sometimes gets traction, gets value, gets likability, gets characters to be on his side, and so he gets lost in the storyline. I think one of the most beautiful things for a human being to have is fewer belief systems in your backpack that you're carrying on a regular basis. I'm really pro not affiliated with a political party, not automatically saying like an entire system is wrong or corrupt. So whoever's listening, if you say police officers are evil or police officers are incredible, when you have those extreme views, I would say is like you now get stuck in a story where it's really hard to pay attention to when you have ends of one, two, or three stories that exist, things that actually happened that don't fit with the narrative. And so it's better just to be like, I assume benevolence until proven otherwise. And I have fewer things in my backpack, which means I can say, you know what? Every police officer I associate with, I freaking love. I would protect them. I love that they're protecting me. But man, that guy in Louisiana, what he did is totally morally reprehensible and unacceptable. I hope people don't mistake that he represents police officers everywhere. I'm not tied to the story. I'm focusing on the individual situations and collecting information.
Yeah, I think that's exactly why I love listening to you talk is consideration for the nuance within everything. And I think, from a philosophical standpoint, what philosophers attempt to do, at least the way I'm thinking about it now as you talk, it's like the trolley problem isn't meant to have a perfect solution. I think that's
Yeah.
ultimately what we're mining for. It's like, there's that example problem of what problem example situation. Your significant other has this rare form of cancer, you can't get the medicine through insurance or whatever. It's like you can go steal it from the store. If you steal it, is that, did you break some like ethical code or moral code? It's like, I don't know. And maybe, but like the context, and you start to consider all these things. And you're like, what should you actually do? And it's like, it depends. I mean, it depends on so many things that the decision I end up making isn't necessarily the right one or the correct one. It's just one of the options. And there's a Thomas Sowell quote that I love. I want to say he like opens a book with it, but I just heard it in passing.
There are no
Something along the
solutions, just trade-offs.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And the more I've started to think about it, it's actually hard to think about for me. I don't know if some people have like an easier time with it, but this idea of like everything's simply a trade-off. I really work to find the best answers to problems, or to have a clear-cut explanation. I'm putting together a lit review for like, I'm kind of in the process of like putting together a lit review presenting that, proposing, and defending. It's funny because one of the last times we talked, I was getting into the doc program, and I'm like 2 years in now. Um, but as I'm doing, I'm like, how do people normally do this? Like, I don't have some schema for writing a lit review. So I'm trying to imagine, like, I wish someone could do it and I could watch, and then I'd have a better sense. It's like, I don't think things really work out that way. I think you approximate it, you ask good questions, you try to have information of like, how do I find sources? How do I look for, how do I look for other sources? How do I form the paper? How do I form sections? There's no handbook. And you really want a handbook.
Yeah.
So I guess all of your work, as you mentioned in your laboratory, what you attempt to do is provide some sort of guidance by studying these like really big ideas of like well-being and saying this is what we found, but knowing that everything's a trade-off, knowing that everything's a complex system, knowing there's not this like complete certainty. How do you navigate that space? Whereas someone says Jordan Peterson's like on par with a god, someone says he's on par with Satan. It's like obviously both are not true. So how do you navigate that like murky waters?
The when you're a pragmatist in a world of extremism, there's no place for us. Like we just free float around. We kind of there's a mosh pit, and we just kind of we just walk our way through all the pushing and kind of get ourselves to the other side and get ourselves a drink and chill out and walk right back. We're avoiding all the fights here and there, bobbing and weaving. I mean, that's what it's like to be a political moderate and a pragmatist. But I think it's like there's so many of us, we just don't organize together, which is fine. I mean, one of the things that we do, or I do, with my research, or even like these conversations, or anything, is I'm really big about having sections where here's the evidence for the opposite of what I'm saying. And so some of my favorite papers that we've written in our discussion section, we have like 6 or 7 hypotheses about like what the hell we just found. So we don't say, here's the storyline we got. Like we had this one series of studies which has gotten some traction, which I love. Social anxiety is a big problem, especially in America. Got about 12.7% of Americans experience it, where you have this extreme fear that the greatest weaknesses and the weaknesses that you have and vices that you have as an individual will be visible to other people and will be the reason that you're rejected. And people that are high in social anxiety have this chronic feeling like you can see what's wrong with me and you're going to reject me. It's a terrible feeling to have. And if you have it regularly, I mean, this is when I was a therapist, these were the kids and adults that I loved treating, because it was so great to help them realize like people are much more narcissistic than you think, and they're not paying as much attention to you as possible. So what we discovered in our work was that about 20% of people with excessive social anxiety are aggressive, hypersexual, impulsive, substance users, violent, verbally and physically, and they're not shy and timid at all. They're actually extremely sociable. So the question is like, who the hell, what kind of weird profile is that? And so we kept finding it over and over again. And then what we'd write in our papers is like, here's our ideas of like what this group of people is. And my favorite hypothesis, which has not been proven or disproven, is that one real cool strategy, if you're constantly sensitive and worried about being rejected, is I'll reject you, Josh, before you reject me. So I'm just going to see you in the bar and just start talking smack to you, push you down, tell my friends like to kick you in the face, and whatever that thing was in American, curb stomp you in American History X. Not because you did anything wrong, because I can imagine you're the type of person that would reject me if I didn't reject you first. And then when you think about the hypersexuality, it's the idea that I will be aggressive in my dating process, because this way, if you reject me, it's because I went in too hard. And you didn't reject me as a person. I actually went and attacked you somewhat first. And when you think about like substance use, it's the idea of like, you could never call me as being, unsophisticated or unintelligent or non-witty, because I just injected a whole bunch of acid and, and mushrooms and weed. And the thing is like, it's not me. It's all the drugs. Like wait till you get to know me. I'm amazing. And so I have this built-in excuse like it's almost like a buffer to protect me from being rejected. It's a dangerous subtype because you have to convince somebody that all of these shields are preventing you from real connections, and yet they're serving their purpose of protecting you from some level of insecurity and rejection.
How so from your experience, you are trying to understand why someone would posture in that particular way. Had understanding that, hypothesizing, trying to get a sense of like why this occurs, is that's one thing, but then having an intervention to treat is another. And I mean, I think you mentioned you would get people who would come into your clinic who had experienced social anxiety, and you would help them work through that. What's the process of working through that deep, such deep fear of rejection that they posture and layer and protect?
Yeah, great question. So, in its simplest form, there's two parts: safety behaviors and exposure. So, in some ways, when you were talking about Cognitive of the American Mind by Greg and John,
Mm.
that they're really talking a lot about exposure is gradually being exposed to things you're afraid of. And in its simplest way, it's the notion of if somebody didn't think you were funny and smart and playful and interesting, what's the worst thing that could happen? So one thing that we would do in the clinic is, and I say this because everyone listening can do this, mentally or write down like what you think is going to happen when you go to the party this weekend, when you go to the social gathering. Like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Write it down. Like, you're going to be banished. Like, people aren't going to be friends with you anymore when you say something ridiculous. The more extreme thing you write, it's great because I am almost sure, probabilistically, it's
Mm.
not going to happen. So it's like a win-win situation. And if it's not that extreme, great. Then you're probably going to have like a good time when you go there. Then you have the experience itself, come back, and we talk about like what happened. And for most people, they realize like when you went up to a stranger who was next to you in line as you were at the bar, what happened when you said something? I turned to them. I said, "Hey, really love your shirt." They said, "Cool, thanks a lot." And then they turned around, went on their smartphone. I'm like, "So how do you interpret that? Is that a
Mm.
rejection? Is that a failure?" I was like, "No." Like they were kind of impolite. I'm like, "Yeah, it's kind of on them. Like you did everything possible. So let's focus on the
Yeah.
process and not the outcome." You could go up to the most gorgeous man or woman who's sitting by themselves and be like the funniest, most amazing storyteller you've ever been. And still that person turn to you and be like, "Thanks for coming over. I'm going to go back to my book."
Yeah.
You have no idea why. Maybe they're married. Like maybe they're in a bad mood. Like maybe they just socialize for 5 minutes. You have no idea. But I want you to walk away and be like, "Damn, was I good? I was so socially astute. Like if I could be that way all the time." And not only go one step further, not only don't pay attention to the outcome, it's a great story.
Mm.
You were incredible and still you didn't get rejected. And you know what? When you tell that story, everybody's going to be on your side.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that. And I love, we were talking before we started recording, and I was kind of mentioning that like, the podcast is pretty level in terms of traction and listenership. And I'll get on, yourself and Scott Barry Kaufman and Stephen Hayes, these giants, and I'm like, man, this is going to be the episode that takes off. And I don't see an uptick. But as you're talking about social anxiety and how to manage that, and how to expose yourself to situations, and how to kind of more realistically understand what's going on within those interactions, I've realized this is very applicable, and a lot of people probably experience this, and I think a lot of people gain a ton of value from it. And the fact that there's no change in listenership doesn't change how impactful it is. And I've actually gotten texts. I got a text from my good buddy Jordan Brown, and he said the episode with Scott was great, like fantastic. And I've gotten, my Chris, I mentioned Chris Tabor. He's like, he was on the episode before the one with Stephen Hayes or something, and he's like, "Oh, you're gonna put me before this, huge monumental giant in research and in psychology." So I think everything you're talking about resonates so strongly, even with myself. And I know we've kind of bonded over this, but when I was really young, I had crippling social anxiety, and it doesn't rear its head anymore. It's just like it kind of makes a little noise in the background, like 1,000 feet away, and I can kind of hear this like distant resonance, which is
I like that anthropomorphism of your social anxiety. I like that.
Yeah, and that, the way it manifested is I had like a hoodie and like two t-shirts on, and I had the hood up, and I would go to the gym and I'd lift weights, and I was just like, I can't expose myself to the world. It's like I need to protect myself and,
Yeah.
and close myself off as much as possible. And now I'm like, I can't wait to go for a run and just peel the layers off, and you kind of like celebrate what I've been able to do over the last like 15 years. So I think to what you're talking about, it's like so relatable. And I love the fact that you're able to one study it, understand it, and then communicate it so well.
Wait, Josh, can I play with something you said? Because I'm now have a hypothesis.
Sure.
So it's all over online, and it's my experience in the gym as well. And I'm curious because you're even more of a gym person than me. Do you think that one of the reasons that some of the biggest muscular people, men and women in the gym, are some of the nicest people, but people misinterpret that, is because a lot of these people put on all of this like physical muscular armor because they
Mm,
of their insecurities and all the issues that a lot of us go through when they're younger.
yeah. I mean,
And
I
they
think
and they hold on to and they hold on to it. So like they're really sensitive
yeah,
to protecting,
yeah.
the little guy or gal.
Yeah, no, I completely get that, and I would agree. In one thing I've been doing, because I work with high school kids now. I've been a strength coach for going on 2 years,
Oh, nice.
and you would love this. You would love this. There's a kid. He plays lacrosse, and he was coming in during the off season and then in season and lifting with the team, and I don't want to say too much about him, so I'm not going to go into it. But there was something that I kind of connected with him over. And I one day mentioned as we were standing by the squat rack, have you heard of Marcus Aurelius? Have you heard of like his work, meditations? He's like, no. I was like, it was a book that opened me up to philosophy, but it just opened me up to thinking about life in just like such a different way. And I told him I would get it for him. And I was in Pittsburgh. I went on a date, and we were walking up and down this little like nice strip. It's a kind of more wealthy neighborhood, and we go into a bookstore, and I start to walk around the bookstore. I don't see anything I like because my eyes immediately go for the philosophy section and like the science sections, and I don't see anything I like. The only book I find is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, and I'm like, oh, perfect. I buy it, and then I start to have my doubts, like. Because I'm reading through it, and Marcus Aurelius is talking about gods, and he's talking about death, and he's talking about very heavy topics. And I'm like, can I give this to like a 16-year-old who in Morgantown, West Virginia? And I told my buddy Tom that, and he was like, yeah, you totally should. So I go to high school, I go to the weight room, I put it in my desk, and I'm just like in there waiting between groups, and a kid walks up, and he's like, hey, I heard you have a book for me. And I open the drawer, I pull it out, I give it to him. I say, hey, this is a really meaningful book to me. It really changed my life, and I hope it does the same for you. And he's like, oh, I'm a huge history buff, so I'm excited to read it. And I haven't been able to talk to him since, but it's like that realization that like lifting weights and being in that physical culture and being in that like intellectual culture has like done so much for me in terms of changing my experience of the world. It's like, how can I pass that on? And I think kind of what you're talking about is, you get people in the gym who maybe are coming from a place of less than or needing to live up to, and they develop competence and skills and all these things that like permeate their entire life. I mean, when you're fit and you're strong, you don't just look good, you're more capable. I mean, you feel like if shit went down, you'd be able to manage it. And I think it's like, oh, I see that and I recognize it. I want to share that with other people.
Yeah.
So you try to bring them in. It's like, I want to get my mom in the weight room. I want to get these kids for a lifetime in the weight room. It's not just that kind of like transient sort of like, well, I'm better than you. It's like, no, this makes you more capable. Like you should feel it. You should experience it.
And you kind of want to have like you want to protect them from
That's
anyone that gives them heat for
that's right.
being in there. This idea of like someone being in the gym before they're fit. It's like, well, that's beautiful. Like they're in. Like this is the starting point. What I love, there's a lot of things. I mean, I almost got teary eyed. Well, I did, like from that story is so amazing. But to me, one of the big things is like that kid probably really looks up to you. And so this is like a physical incarnation of your mentor relationship with this high schooler. And so for that book, it's like sacred. This is like coming from this guy I look up to, and I hope everyone that listens realizes the power of spending $10 to give a gift like that to someone that looks up to you, because man, like having those things as an adult, just imagine when that kid is 30 and then his friends are over and they're watching a game, and then all of a sudden like Marcus Aurelius, and he's like wait, before you judge it, hold on, let me tell you the story behind this book.
Yeah.
It's like linked to this guy, and the thing is like to give away these interesting moments and stories to people, and to be able to have the relationship carry through this physical object. I think sometimes we forget the tendrils, the psychological tendrils that attach us to other people. And that's why this story is such a beautiful one. And I think we should constantly be trying to replicate that story.
Well, and coming back to like the quality and depth of your work, which has like kept me, hooked on everything you've written and put out, is, how to better understand like relationships and psychology to then facilitate that stuff. And I was having a conversation with a friend about like good listening, like what are traits of like high quality listening and being very present, which as you mentioned, like as we're having this conversation and podcasting, it's work, to be able to listen and keep up with and understand and facilitate, ask good questions, stay on topic to some extent, to access your expertise, to keep a conversation flowing, and to know when it's engaging and you're kind of like gripped by it versus not. Like that's not easy. I wouldn't say. I'd say it's definitely like something you develop. And like work from the psychological giants, work from, more modern psychological giants like yourself, it helps you have a better understanding of how to facilitate and develop those attributes of like great relationships. And I can see it now, and I can appreciate it, and I can communicate that much more effectively, which is just like further facilitating the relationship. It's like Miracle Grow, It's like I've had multiple friends now give me like pretty much boxes of books from like Dostoevsky and their favorite authors. And it's like, I realize that for them is a tremendous act of, like reaching out and saying, I really like you. I really love you as a friend. Um, this is how I communicate it, and not just brushing that off as like, oh, cool. Like I got a bunch of books, but like the handwritten note my buddy Chris gave me, he's going to listen to this. I put it on my fridge, you know, like those things that like mean a lot. So the work you do, I love it because it's so embedded in the day to day, person to person. It's like it's real life shit. It's not just kind of like mechanistic armchair kind of theorizing or just publishing something to publish something.
Yeah, yeah, no, thank you. It's funny because I do this monthly Zoom call with all the people that are paid subscribers to the newsletter, and then I just had the recording today, and people were commenting. I'm like, oh my God, we interrupt each other so much, and we talk so fast, and so I said, be careful about how you frame this, because the outsider looks at that and says, God, these people like are obnoxious and self-centered and self-absorbed, but they're wrong. Like what it is it's a sign of like you're so interested in what people say. It's like you've got your Mars Lego block set. I've got my Iowa Farmer Lego block set. We're gonna mix these things together, and together it's gonna create something that's never been created before socially in a conversation format. And so how that looks, it's not people giving a monologue and then
Mhm.
another person gives a monologue and
Yeah.
then another one. It's like, wait, hold on a second. Let me go back to that thing you said before. Wait, hold on. That just reminded me of this like thing I was like working on, and then I prematurely quit it. That happened. They're like, hold on. Reminded me of this book that I wanted to tell you about.
Mm.
That's what a beautiful social gathering is, where you feel psychologically safe enough that you could just jump around and no one's going to be judging you. And like we're all looking for that effortless communication.
Yeah, I love that. It's like so integrated and so connected and so activating that you're just able to kind of like bounce around and discuss different ideas and topics, but it's all kind of related to, someone has some like fodder and you're able to kind of latch onto that. Two things I did want to explore, which, it's kind of funny, time like flies, but two things I did want to explore had this presentation over the last semester, and in a little like intro to who I am, I said would probably score high on measures of curiosity. It's like a little funny, a little like ode to my sense of humor, and that was coming off the back end of me checking out your book on curiosity, and which is like awesome. I'm like I now identify as someone who's very curious, and that book was like a huge treatise of just like piecing together like great literature and great anecdote, and great writing. Could you kind of just riff on curiosity as something you've researched and aimed to understand, and kind of the place of that attribute like within your life?
Yeah, I mean, let me describe some of the coolest findings that I love sharing with the planet. Is everybody thinks they understand curiosity. It seems so simple. You like to ask a lot of questions, you ponder things, you seek out novel experiences, you like learning, and I'm here to say that based on work by our team, by Paul Sylvia at North Carolina Greensboro, is like most people get 50% of even the definition wrong. So if you go into a dictionary definition, open up Oxford, Cambridge, whatever, go into your Scrabble book, and it's going to say something to the effect of curiosity is the desire to seek out new information and experiences. That's okay. That's like an okay definition. I've used that in papers and articles before. So what happens in a moment determines whether or not you're curious. So take this conversation right now. You're talking about a story of you going on a date, you go to a bookstore, and my mind's like, oh man, like this, like that's a good date. Like it's like what a cool test because to see what does your date gravitate towards in a bookstore, right? Like, and then like, hey, can I read you this thing? Like this looks so freaking cool, and they do the same. I mean, okay. So if that's all you get from this episode, that alone is juicy as hell. If there are any bookstores left in America. So in these situations, you're telling the story. What's going to determine whether or not I'm curious? So there are two judgments that I would make in this moment. I call it, it's on the fringes of conscious awareness. I'm not really fully aware because it happens in like milliseconds. So one of them and that is this thing Josh bringing up right now, the stimuli, like the information, the experience, is it new? Is it interesting? Is it uncertain? Is it complex? Is it something that I want to explore? If yes, you're on your way to being curious. Now, most definitions stop there, but that's only one of the two questions. So now you're almost there. The second question, which gets ignored, is so fundamental, which is, do I think I can handle and cope with the novelty, uncertainty, complexity of what Josh is talking about? If I don't think I can follow along, if I don't think I can understand enough of it, then what happens is I sort of tune out. If I don't think I can pay attention to it because you're using highfalutin language and your GRE words, and it's, just like it's just too complicated for me, you don't get curious. So novelty enough is not enough to be curious. And the key thing about the second question is, do you believe you can handle the novelty? Now, this is important. Objectively, you might not be smart enough. You might not have enough knowledge. I mean, you're getting a PhD. So like there are some people, when you start talking about statistics and hierarchical linear modeling and latent class growth curve modeling, like people are basically going to tune out and be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Can we just talk about what's our favorite bourbon? Just, I need you to shut up. So they're not going to be curious because the novelty's there, but they don't believe they can manage the content of that novelty. So you have to have both. And when both those things are there, that's when you fall in love with the intrigue of music, movies, people's conversational content, looking at something in nature, like some weird ass salamander like creature like crawls onto your arm that happens there. You eat something and there's some flavor palette that pops in there. You're like, what the hell is that? Now you could say that, but you still might be in the mindset of, I can manage this, but I'm like, it feels like maple syrup, like wrapped around like a Tootsie Roll, and there's some like Himalayan sea salt here. Like, what is this thing? Right? So like, it's novel, but you're managing it. And I think big mistake that people make is they try to inject more novelty in their life, and they don't think about, can I be open to being less than perfectly skilled to handle this novelty and still go in. And I'll give another concrete example, just trying to imagine who your audience is. Just imagine like a new sport that your people are playing and they're saying, and you're at the beach, you're on a vacation, and they're like, join in. This is lawn bowling. Join in. This is the biathlon where somehow it's skiing and you have like a shotgun at the same time. Like join in. This is curling. I know everyone makes fun of curling. You got that little broom and you're pushing that little ice frisbee to try to middle the center. Now your natural impulse for a lot of people is, nah, it's not my thing. Like I don't know how to play that. And I'm saying experiment with
Yeah.
being like the white belt and just going in there and like it's new and just put your hands up and say like, you know what? I will probably be terrible at this, but how can I not try?
I love that. And I think that that is an invitation to just explore things that maybe have been unexplored or you might be turned off to because you're unsure, maybe lack a little bit of confidence or you lack that certainty of like what happens if, it doesn't go well or if I fail. And it's like, yeah, well, then you'd have a great story on the back end of that about how you fell on your
Exactly.
ass and how you're bottom up. So and this will be a personal question off that. This is my own interest, maybe less for the listeners. Are there any like more like biological or like genetic underpinnings of curiosity to know if some people are, generally going to be more curious than others? Are there like underlying factors related to that?
Yeah, there's a good body of research on it's called the D4DR and it's basically this particular strand of dopamine and you could see like if we had access to all of our genotypes and you could see like all right like what is the genetic baggage that I've been carrying around with. If you have a longer strand of this basically this dopaminergic sequence, you tend to be more novelty seeking, you tend to be more curious. Now here's where it gets interesting for everybody is people in Israel tend to have much higher D4 DR strands compared to America, which leads to an awesome question, which you can tell me what you think about because I don't have the answer. Like, why would people in Israel have a higher propensity towards curiosity than people in America?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. How much stock do you put in how much stock? How much do you consider that when you discuss a big topic like curiosity, knowing that it's a small underlying mechanistic component? Because as you're talking about that, like I think in a previous podcast I made the same comment. It's like, holy shit, things are complex, and it's like how many individual like factors or aspects could we pull out and isolate and say this tends to be correlated with, when you have a longer or shorter this or that, or it's formed in this way, it tends to correlate with, um, I just have a hard time understanding like, okay, within the complex human experience, how does that all kind of aggregate or sum up to create this expression of what you would define as curiosity?
Oh, that was the simple version. I mean, I didn't go through the how the hippocampus is brought in there, and basically we all have a different level of um, density of dopamine like receptors in the hippocampus. So if you tend to have like a greater density, and to make it more complicated unnecessarily, but that's how it is like what is the speed to which dopaminergic activity has the reuptake in terms of if you have that experience of listening to you tell that date story of going to the bookstore, I was curious, like, and I had to resist all these questions I had there. So how quickly is my dopamine like a vacuum sucked up into my system such that it doesn't stick around to be intrigued for longer periods of time? So biologically, some of us, those that dopaminergic activity like floats around a little bit longer, and other people, it's just basically this massive high-powered Dyson vacuum and just sucks that up. So like, huh, like okay, next topic. And so it's almost like we're not anywhere near the level where you could look at a neurological blueprint to see, hey, like what's like, do you have that vacuum, dopamine vacuum sucking personality, or does yours like float around on life rats, just like chilling in like a, like a wave pool, just enjoying themselves? And so it's a fun way of thinking about neuroscience is that is your dopamine sitting in like little like floaties in a wave pool, or are they being sucked up by a vacuum? And then in the future, we'll be able to see that in infants and in young kids and tell whether or not they have a greater genetic propensity to being curious. And then you get to the even cooler stuff, which
Yeah.
is in a classroom or at the gym or in a therapy office, is to figure out like, okay, if your dopamine gets sucked up quicker and doesn't linger longer, I'm going to respond to you differently than the
Mm.
person where it lingers longer. I have to ask more. I have to give more what I call curiosity lures. Like I might have to describe things in more scintillating ways, like movie trailers, to suck you into the storyline that goes in it. More examples, more metaphors for personalized for you. Where if you're a really curious person, I don't have to put that much effort in because you're already sucked into the topic.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I love the book and I love your description of kind of the layers of one, creating how curiosity is like manifested, but also how it can be different from person to person, but how you can try to coax out some of that by, exposing yourself to new experiences and probably being around people who would be more inclined to say like, hey, come join us, come be a part of this. Like, let's try something new out. I'm all about that. Like the first thing I think when I go to a place I've been before, like the Bay Area, like Oakland, California, or to a place I've never been, like, Seneca Rocks in southern West Virginia, is like, what can I do that I haven't done there? Like what can I explore that I haven't explored? And I love, in like day to day, it's like I go to the places where I'm really familiar and I know their coffee's great and I know I can sit down and crank out a lot of work. But if I'm, really trying to enjoy myself, it's all about new experiences and novelty and just seeing kind of what out there exists that I've never encountered or come into contact with. And in your book, you encapsulate that really well.
No, no, thank you. There's been so much good research since that book came out that like there's this model by Ken Sheldon and Sonia Lyubomirsky, the hedonic adaptation prevention model. So basically, like one of the things why it's so hard to be happy and remain happy is you start to adapt to whatever your thing is.
Mm.
It's just like your body, right? Like if you like the first year that you lift weights, I mean, if you do preacher curls and you do reverse curls and you're doing like waiter curls, listen, I could just leave you alone and you're gonna grow.
Yeah.
But at year three, all of a sudden we got to get creative, right? We do supersets. Am I like basically like just basically well anyway, I'm talking to you. So this is I don't need to explain this on this podcast. So you adapt. Your body adapts, and all of a sudden you be more creative in terms of how do you wear yourself out with cardio before you do a waiter's curl? Do you
Mm.
triceps before you do biceps. You mix them together. So we adapt, and we adapt psychologically. One of the problems in relationships, friendships, romances, family, is once you start to be in there long enough and your philosophies, your values, your goals, your personality, your friendship circle, your social circle, your financial resources, I have access to them and I've given you access to mine. You're integrated into my sense of self. So I've adapted to you. And so all of a sudden, other people look more tantalizing because
Mm.
I don't, the expansion opportunities are greater. So how do you sustain relationships when you adapt to them? And one of the things in this model is novelty and variety. It's just like you said. So if you go to the Bay Area with your close friends and you take a guy's trip or a gal's trip over there, the thing is going to the same places that you went to, the exact same places. You walk over the Golden Gate Bridge, you take a bike ride through, Sausalito, you go to Alcatraz, but you're with someone else to see their
Mm.
perspective.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, the variety of how like they respond to this, they saw something you didn't see, like that's what keeps things alive. And so it's really like infusing variety, and don't underestimate having another person's perspective is this low cost endeavor. For everything that you do, you can do it a second time with somebody.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that quote of, being a stranger in your own land kind of holds there as well. It's like, you know, what the one of the coolest things for me walking through, say like a Berkeley or Oakland, is when you're on the sidewalk, like the plant life is unbelievable. Like the variety of plants, the sizes and shapes and colors. And I was actually in a Strader's in Columbus, Ohio, over the weekend, and my friend Leah was buying plants for her patio, and as we were walking through the greenhouse, I was like, "This is what Berkeley's like just like the sheer variety and number of plants and types, and it's so awesome because you just feel like there's so much to explore. I could walk the same path 1,000 times, but I didn't see those. I didn't see those flowers, or I didn't see the cactus over in that yard. And I think that's why people love the Bay Area. It's like there's just so much going on. And to some extent, it's all contained in the same place, but it's all just different forms of like, or different experiences of novelty. And one thing I told my buddy Seb when I would record podcasts with him is the last thing I would want to happen is I stop being curious enough to bring in new information that I just sound like I'm hashing out the same thing over and over and over again, telling the same anecdotes and with the same information. I just want to keep bringing in new information and novel information, and being able to provide that in interesting ways to everyone who decides to tune in, and they kind of deserve that too, not just to get the same experience, 100 different times. And
Yeah, this is why I've something that I've changed my view on is I used to have this gatekeeper approach of like, oh my God, like four more happiness books are coming out this year, just because I was involved in the beginning, like back in 1998. So just so many, and I've sort of changed my view on that, which is everyone's got their unique spin on it, right? A woman writing a curious book, just like mine, would be totally different just from their vantage point. Someone in Malaysia who would write the book would be different than mine. Someone who's younger, so it goes in there and like, hey, like if there's room for 60 happiness books because whatever style like connects with you so that you integrate this in your life, like that's great. And so it's just something I'm less judgmental about because I've just heard people read newer books and it just sparks so many insights for them. I'm like, whatever does it for you, like whatever makes you move the psychological needle, don't care. Like if you're not interfering with someone else's well-being, I don't care how it works for you.
yeah, and one thing I've noticed that you do is you continually pump out like work that I feel so relevant, to my own life. Like I'll see all the articles you come out with, all the things you talk about, and I'm like, wow, that's incredibly pertinent and something I would want to devour immediately. And a question I was thinking about before the podcast is, Todd, what are you interested in lately? Like, what have you been thinking a lot about? What have you been, have you been reading? Have you been reading research related to anything? Just having like your own personal experience related to some idea or topic? But what have you been interested in lately?
Great question. So one is, as someone who's recently divorced, I am very interested in how the social stigma that we still attach to it in society. It's as if we're in the 1960s still for a lot of people. And so, like, you might have seen that article I wrote about recalibrating your thoughts about divorce. But this also relates to breakups as well. Like, just so I'm really interested in how people, the science behind it, and sociology behind how people change in the aftermath of relationship endings. And one of the things that's really interesting to me is about it's not so much the person necessarily. It's more like the rituals of someone knows what you were like in eighth grade. They've heard the stories. Like there's the idea of you walk home into your house when at the end of the day and someone asks you, hey, like, how'd your day go? And you don't have to give all the character names. Like they know all the supporting cast and the main cast. You name like seven of your friends in the middle of this podcast, right? It's like there's all these characters. So for you to enter into a relationship, someone's got to figure out who all these names are and attach their personalities and how they're linked with you, like how you met them that goes in there. And so there's so little psychological research on this topic where it's not the person per se. It's that you lost all of these very low maintenance ways of sharing the elements of what happens to you on a regular basis to another person. And there's this great like fear of, shoot, like am I going to get back to a place where it's that simple to get there? So I'm fascinated by relationship science right now about this. And the other part of this on the flip side, since as an old man, like back in the dating pool, is really like there's so little research about this jagged profile in terms of, okay, we're very good at understanding what people say they want in a partner. We're very good at understanding what personality traits, values, and goals can predict the dissolution or ending of a relationship. What we're terrible at is figuring out like which profiles work, like these 36 variable personality profiles, like which work well with other ones and why. Like we have so little knowledge about it, which is kind of amazing to figure out. So I can tell you, someone that's high in neuroticism tends to be a bad romantic partner. So if two people in a relationship tend to be different in sensation seeking, risk taking, thrill seeking, really low probability that relationship's going to work out. Now, in terms of if you differ from your partner by 3 points on a 10-point scale of physical attractiveness, and 2 points on intelligence, and and 4 points on your generosity, I have no idea. Like I am a social psychologist and clinical psychologist who knows this literature backwards and forwards, and we have no idea what happens. So I am super psyched to be studying this and thinking about this over the next few decades.
Wow. That's awesome. That's very exciting. Um, I mean, all of it kind of resonates, and that um, that article you wrote, it was kind of something that had like sat in the back of my mind and just like popped out, randomly when I would think about it. And there is stigma definitely associated with it, and again, it's trying to apply this like very certain lens to something that can be uncertain, which is when does this stop working? When is this like not worth continuing with, which is a relationship between two people. Um, as someone who's just been dating recently, it's a lot easier when I feel like, okay, this probably wouldn't be best in a long term. So I probably shouldn't just continue to pursue it for no reason or no end. But when you're committed and married to someone and you feel like, wow, it's been on the downturn for a very long time. It's like, when do you decide to pursue a different course of action? And I don't know if it's clear or clean or easy.
Yeah, all of that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
what was interesting, and I know this is we're opening portals versus closing this down, which was the goal,
Yeah.
is if you watch if listeners want to go there, the LinkedIn conversation about this article I wrote, it is fascinating
Yeah.
because you have a bunch of women who are commenting, mostly women, who are saying, I had a divorce. It was one of the best things that ever happened to me.
Wow.
Not in the beginning, not the first few weeks, not the first few
Yeah.
months, but for my life. And then you have a bunch of men, maybe like five, who are like, no, this is a terrible idea. This is a terrible article. You are a terrible human being, Todd. It is always bad. It is not courageous. It's a terrible thing. It's bad for society. Nobody's happy after divorce. And I just had this natural response. It's all there for people to read. Where I was like, have you never met anyone who was emotionally or physically neglected or abused in a
Yeah.
relationship before and left? And you can say, that's not courageous. That's not hard. That's not a good thing. I want my sisters. I want my friends' sisters. I would love my mom to get remarried and physically abused and stay in the relationship forever and never divorce because it's such a bad thing to do. I mean, and then, crickets. It's once you like start playing out all the permutations, of course sometimes it's a good thing. And of course sometimes it's a bad thing. And people don't know how to problem solve and they leave quicker. But it's amazing how black and white so many people's thinking is.
Wow. So is that something we can possibly expect a book on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. As someone who's like read all of your stuff, I'm really looking forward to the next project. And I feel like, at a you know circumstantial time in my life, it kind of makes sense. So I'm looking forward to whatever you put out. Um, and one, the conversation's been fantastic. I love the the ability you have to take in information and just like put out the most interesting and deep and meaningful information related to pretty much all the bullshit I just spewed. I'm like bumbling along trying to figure it out, and then you have some like really well timed, well put together answer that's like really well informed. So I really I always love that. I always love that.
I mean, your questions are amazing. I mean, look, if you were to when you put this out, if you put down here are the topics that we discussed, it's not going to fit on a page. I mean, that's a great conversation. Like that's the to me that's this is why I do podcasts in the hopes I get a Josh as an interviewer.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm gonna need to put that on a t-shirt and just wear it around. Be a great conversation starter. But you know, people are interested. I know you have a Substack, and I know you have tons of books, and I know you have, you know, an academic position, and there's a lot of stuff you do. But is there an easy way to direct people to your work?
I mean, the Substack is like my love affair right now. I mean, I have no editor. I can write anything I want, and I just love writing it. So, you know, and you can people can get it for free. So just find it online.
Awesome. If people are interested in keeping up with all the work that I do, you can follow me on Instagram at Josh_Phil WL. That's PHILWL. Philosophical weightlifting everywhere else. Todd, once again, it was a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate it.
This will not be the last one. We will have more.
Yeah. And for everyone tuning in, we will catch you all next week on another episode of the podcast.